Well, another week of the offseason is finally passed. We're one more week closer to the NFL draft, and there's a lot that we've got to be able to get to between now and then. But one of the topics, TJ, that a lot of people are discussing right now, because there are some big names. Your guy, Aaron Rodgers, we know it's going to be, hey, it's either going to be the Jets, Green Bay, or, it's just Jets and nothing else. But Lamar Jackson. The conversation surrounding him and his very opportunistic tweet while John Harbaugh, his coach, was at the owners' meeting doing his press conference. But it brings up the question of the quarterback situation here in Detroit. And a lot of people still believe that the Lions is a good place for Lamar Jackson, that it's a good fit because of the cap room, because of the draft capital. That's all fact. That in terms of the business side of things, I think it's a good fit. In terms of Brad Holmes' philosophy, I don't think it fits. And we heard then again yesterday from Dan Campbell when he was speaking at the owners' meeting how much they love Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is going to be their guy for some time, for this foreseeable future. But what we don't know is who's going to be that backup quarterback. Nate Sudfeld re-signed this week. Are we putting too much, or I don't know how much you've listened to Stoney and I in the morning. I'm of the mindset that unless they go in with a reliable backup, and I wouldn't put Nate Sudfeld. He may be, but we don't know. He hasn't thrown a pass since 2020 in a regular season game. Am I putting too much into the Lions need to find a reliable number 2 quarterback in case Jared Goff has to miss a second half of a game, or if he's out for a week or two? This doesn't take into account, and I don't think anybody is in great position other than the San Francisco 49ers to be, if their starting quarterback goes down in week 3, the rest of their season's probably host. But am I putting too much stock into or too much emphasis on the importance of the backup quarterback?
Yeah, I don't put as much stock into it as other people do. And I think really the last couple weeks, people are like, well, quarterback, what about a backup? Our starter goes down, we're screwed. It's like, well, welcome to the other 31 teams.
Yeah.
Right? If Patrick Mahomes goes down, the Chiefs ain't winning the Super Bowl, right? Joe Burrow goes down. They're not in good shape. Nobody's going to be in good shape if your starting quarterback goes down. I'm not a believer that you take the path to, go get a guy that's, going to cost you $8-10 million a year. I think that's money that could be better spent elsewhere. I think that, look, you have to be realistic. Of course you want a guy that can come in and when if for a series or two, if you're winning the ball game, that can just go in and not screw things up, right? Everybody wants a guy like that, and I think those guys can be found pretty easily. But if you're talking about a guy that we're going to need to go win, 7, 8, 9 games, those guys don't exist. And so yes, I think the backup quarterback position in my mind might be the lowest on the list of what they have to do over the next month. I just don't put that. I don't value that as high as some other people do. I think that especially, wasn't it a couple years ago the Lions invested a ton of money into, not a ton, but who was the backup quarterback? Chase Daniel. Didn't they pay him like a 2-year, $18 million deal? It's like, you really want to put that much resource into a backup quarterback? An insurance plan when you can spend that money elsewhere. I just don't think that it's a necessity right now. And look, we don't know much about Nate Sudfeld. Like you said, we didn't see him play at all last year. We didn't see him in the preseason. He wasn't signed until after camp broke for the Lions. But even, the Sudfeld signing to me was, I didn't even put that much stock into that. I still think that there's a decent chance that they can get a guy in this year's draft, whether it be, second, third, fourth round, a guy that can come in and, sit for a little bit and learn. And, I'm not a believer in putting in too much capital into the backup quarterback position, a position that is never going to play, and a position that if they do play, your team's probably screwed like every other team in the NFL.
Yeah. So I'm with you in the fact that I don't want to spend $10 million a year on a backup quarterback. I don't want to spend $8 million a year on a backup quarterback. But if Jared Goff misses, like we saw a couple of years ago, he missed 3 games. Tim Boyle came in, and there was pretty much no hope that there was going to be any type of offense. Are you okay with Nate Sudfeld being put in that position for 3 games when we're talking about, and we're going to talk about the over-under, it just came out in terms of the win total for the Lions. I want to get your take on where you think they should be given, everybody stays healthy. But if we're talking about a team that we expect to be a playoff team next year, I mean, can we both agree on that?
Yeah.
If they're a team that,
I hope we
yeah, if they're a playoff team next year, that if Jared Goff has to miss 3 games, how much of an impact would that have on their playoff hopes?
Well, look, I think that this system that Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell run is very, very quarterback friendly. They don't ask the quarterbacks to go out there and make magic out of nothing, right? It's very system oriented, timing oriented. 1-2 reads, that's it, right? And I think Jared Goff has excelled at that. But that to me, that just kind of signals that, hey, if you put a young quarterback in or you put a backup quarterback in, I'm not going to say there's not a huge drop off between Jared Goff and backup quarterbacks in this league, but in this offense, I think that it's much easier to put a guy like that in because it I don't want to say it's easy because playing quarterback's not easy in the NFL, John. We know that. But in this system, you're not asked to be the guy that has to go out there and win the game for your team, right? You got to go. You got to hand the ball off probably 30 times. You got to throw in maybe 15, 20 play action passes and maybe make 5 to 10 other passes on your own on third down to go out there and get the job done. So I have a little bit more comfort knowing that this system is not as complex or not as quarterback, focused,
right?
To say yes, you can put in. I don't want to turn this into like I'm negative against Jared Goff, but
no, but is it more system like San Francisco where we saw them start with Trey Lance, they went to Jimmy G, 100%. Then they went to Brock Purdy, and it was insert quarterback, follow system, follow rules, and you can be successful.
I think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's the kind of offense they want to run. And whether it's Kyle Shanahan with Jimmy Garoppolo all those years, where they were going to the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game and winning playoff games, he wasn't doing anything spectacular. You're talking about guys that are probably throwing, when things are going well, 18 to 24 passes in a game, right? I think the Lions, that's kind of the same type of mentality they want. They want to run the ball. They want to get the play action game going. The quarterbacks don't need to make, 15 to 20 miraculous plays in those offense, like we see with some other offenses with Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and even Josh Allen, right? They put a lot on those quarterbacks. The game plan revolves around those guys, and if they're having an off day, everybody's going to have an off day. You're just not going to be good. These other systems that rely on really the whole offense, the run game, the play action game, those are the systems that I think can afford to have a San Francisco, a Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick, no experience, come in and be able to succeed. Because it's just a different, kind of focal point for the offense. And look, I don't want to turn this, I don't want to say, anything negative about Jared Goff, John, but when you look at especially just those last 8-10 games last year, when did Jared Goff make a throw out of rhythm? Hey, play broke down. I got to make a play, big time. Let's go. I got to deliver this, right? Top of my mind, and I know we had different vantage points last year. I was on the sideline watching. You're obviously watching on the TV. You get to see different things. But I can't remember one player where it's like, wow, that Jared Goff, that was holy crap. You know what I mean? That throw, right? That play, extending the play, whatever it was, that was tremendous. I mean, you think about, obviously, hey, the Jets, right? Come on the 4th one. That's a 3-yard over route. I think 10-year-old quarterbacks can throw that to a wide open tight end. And I'm not trying to diminish what he did, right? You obviously have to make the play. But part of me says you can put other quarterbacks in this system too that will be successful, because I think it's more of Ben Johnson. It's more of Dan Campbell. It's more of their, just the belief in how they want to run the offense, and just fundamentally that. I know that's a conversation we're going to have another time, but when you talk about the quarterback position, it seems like this is a very quarterback-friendly offense that you can put a guy in there and probably still have success.
Okay, so let's take it one step further. I'm with you as well. I don't want to throw Jared Goff under the bus. I think he's a really good quarterback. But Dan Campbell had this to say yesterday at the owners' meeting, and I'm just going to read his quote. Listen, feel really good about it. Goff, love Goff. Goff's our guy, man. I think he's proven over the last 2 years that, man, he's made for us. He's had to endure a lot, just like all of us have. I thought he played his best football last year, and I think he's going to come out and play some of the best this year. Feel good about it. So I love our quarterback position right now. He continues, when you've got a quarterback, you hold on to those guys. I agree with him. And I agree with Brad Holmes saying earlier in the offseason, hey, it's a lot easier to get worse at that position. Jared Goff has 2 years left on his deal. We know the Lions are picking number 6 right now. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, do they take a quarterback at 6? Do they trade up to get a quarterback? I don't care about that right now, but we know the price tag for quarterbacks continues to go up. Is Jared Goff going to be a Detroit Lion past next year? What does he have to show to prove to you that he's the guy that has to be that way? And if not, can they go and get a cheaper version and still have as much success? A lot of questions there.
Well, I mean, this time of year, you always have to kind of filter through the BS a little bit, right?
Right.
This is lying season, right? We're free agency's wrapping up. We're getting into the draft, right? It's, hey, you're trying to predict what other teams are going to do so you can properly, set your draft board and set realistic goals of, hey, do we think we get this guy? Do we have to move? What do we want to do? It's been pretty consistent, though, their praise of Jared Goff over the last year and a half. I don't think anything Dan Campbell said this week was outside of the norm, that what we've heard from him and what we've heard from Brad Holmes. I think they genuinely do like Jared Goff. Jared Goff isn't a perfect quarterback. He doesn't stand toe to toe with, some of the other, top 5 guys, I would say. But production wise, I mean, you can't write off what he did, especially the second half of last year, right? I think everything, look, he asked, what do I want to see different, right? I think obviously the turnovers earlier in the season were killer, right? We obviously know that, hey, maybe that's 2 or 3 more games you could have won if you didn't have all those turnovers. And, some of those didn't go back for, points for the other team. The other thing with him, I kind of mentioned it earlier, was, when plays break down, that's to me what separates the good quarterbacks and the great quarterbacks. The great quarterbacks that have the it factor are guys that are able to make plays when the defense has the perfect call, right? You're still able to, hey, break, contain, break the pocket a little bit, keep your eyes downfield, keep the offense going when nothing's there. I think that's, something that Jared Goff lacks a little bit right now. Every time last year, at least, it seemed like, when he would pull the ball down and scramble, it was just tuck and run and, get out of bounds, don't take a negative play, don't take an interception. Those are some areas where I'd like to see him improve, keeping your eyes downfield. And, hey, you don't always got to tuck and just run, get the ball out, right? Especially if it's third down. I mean, at least take a chance sometimes. The other thing, too, with Jared Goff, and look, I think we could probably agree where an area that I don't even know if it's possible to make improvement at this stage of his career, but there's still a lot left to be desired on the deep ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of times last year where it's like, okay, man, I mean, you're going to have a lot of speed. We know that. DJ Chark was fast. Jameson Williams, obviously fast. I know those guys didn't practice a ton together, so maybe the chemistry wasn't fully there. Maybe Jared Goff didn't get the reps throughout the season enough to trust Jameson later in the season because he was hurt. But I think that's still and I don't want to say it's a huge weakness, but that's something that this team is missing. They're missing the deep threat, right? And even last year, going back to, when I kind of questioned, hey, Jared Goff, when does he come up with that big play where you're like, that was him, not the system, right? Not the play call. I mean, there was one that sticks out, Buffalo, right? You got the ball late in the game. DJ Chark, beats his guy wide open. Jared Goff throws it, 4 or 5 yards outside of him. That should be an easy completion, right? That was a play in my mind that was like, man, that could have probably changed the narrative a little bit.
Then Josh Allen gets the ball and does
we saw what great quarterbacks look like,
yeah.
right? But look, I think that he is obviously what he exemplifies, the character, the attitude, the grit, the toughness, all of those things are characteristics that this team loves. I mean, this team wants in all of their guys. With that being said, though, I'm not looking at just this year, right? I'm looking at the next 5 years. I'm looking at, hey, Jared Goff is getting to the point where you might need to make a decision as soon as this offseason if you want to extend him. Is that a guy that you're going to be comfortable paying $45 million a year to, that can go out there and be a system guy? That's not going to do anything tremendously great, right? He's not going to be tremendously bad. He's going to, when things are going well, he's going to play good. When things aren't going so well, I don't know, right? Yeah. That's the question. That's just the question, right? So I'm looking at, the next 5 years. I think this team is opening up a pretty big window here with the amount of youth that they have, with the amount of draft picks we're going to see, in next month's draft. Do you want to weigh yourself down a little bit by having that big, hefty quarterback contract? That's going to be something that's interesting. And I go back and forth all the time. I got the devil and the angel on the shoulders. And, one's telling me, yeah, you got your quarterback, man. Just let it go. This one's telling me, hey, look at these other teams that have built, hey, they got that young quarterback contract. Look at the other players they can afford. And so I go back and forth a lot on it, but it's going to be a tough decision. I'm glad I'm not the one that's going to have to make it.
That's why we're sitting here and not in Allen Park. So I do want to ask you this question, because one of the sports books came out. Vegas has now come out with the over-under win total. Now that free agency is done, we still have the draft, but we know free agents will probably make more of an impact on this year's team than draft picks, even though the Lions have, those 2 firsts and 2 seconds. The win total for the Detroit Lions this year is at 9.5. Are you taking the over or the under?
I think right now I would take the over for sure.
I would think you'd have to.
I mean, you're just in theory, I know they got hot last year, but 9 wins last year. We're all expecting this team to improve.
Yeah.
That obviously looks like 10 or more. So I would as of right now, I think for sure that 9.5 number is seems a bit low. I'm not going to say this team's, I think they're going to win 13 games, but when you look at the rest of the division, I mean, this is a team that, Dan Campbell, 5-1 against the division last year?
Should be at a minimum be 5-1, I think, this coming year. Now, you could say 4-2, depending on some road games, but I think 5-1 is a realistic division number. And I, too, looked at it and said, shit, they won 9 games this year. They start out 1-6, and I don't want to get lost in the momentum concept of one should carry over to the next year. I don't believe in that. But if the team, the culture, and the confidence of some of those players that are going to be key components next year is at a higher level, plus you've made great additions in the secondary, you're improving the defense that was terrible last year, played better at the end of the year, but you've improved the personnel.
Yeah.
I looked at it originally and I thought, why is it not 10.5? And then I thought, well, okay, are you expecting? I expect the Lions to be a 10-win team. And I know we're only talking about 1 game, but do you expect them to be an 11-win team? What's the top end? Let's start there.
I don't want to get I don't want to get out of control here, but
that's the question. And how much of that is the pain of us growing up watching the Lions, both having played for the Lions, knowing some of the struggles that they've had, knowing this huge giant cloud that hangs over the franchise. Are we getting out of hand, or are we getting ahead of ourselves if we dare to say they could win 12 games?
It's uncomfortable a little bit, isn't it? It's uncomfortable.
I know.
It's not only to say it, but to think it. But no, I think that's where we are, and I think that's realistic. And I think much like last year where we said, hey, I know at this point last year, John and I, we both talked about, hey, I think anything less than 8-9 wins would be a disappointment.
I was at 8, you were at 9, you nailed it.
We looked like idiots, throughout the first half of the season. I mean, when it went 1-6, we're sitting there saying, okay, how are they going to get to this point? They did. And look, I think that it's fair. I think it's okay to change expectations. I think we're at a point now where it's fun. Right. Last year, all we wanted to see was a little bit of improvement, make a little bit of noise. That's something that we got out of that team in the second half of the season. This year, it's different, man. Expectations are different, not only from our perspective, but the players, the coaches. Hey, they showed last year that, you know, they're a team that is ready to take that step.
Yeah.
They did take that step last year. Obviously, we know that, hey, from the outside, 9-8 last year, that looked pretty darn good for us, right? That met our expectations. But nobody in that building was excited about that. You know, those guys are pissed off they were 9-8. They were pissed off they lost that Carolina game and didn't get to the playoffs, because that's the goal every single year. You don't get to that goal, it's a failure, right? But that's going to be the interesting thing, I think, is just the excitement, the optimism, right? The fact that we can, for the first time in a long time, feel confident about our expectations. Now, I know obviously it's scary to do, because it seems like every time we do that, not only with the Lions, but just here in Detroit in general, we get let down pretty hard. And I think a lot of people are scarred from that. But I think it's okay, man. I think it's good. I think it's healthy. I think it's great to have, you know, a fan base and people that are excited to say this team is primed to take another step, not only based off of, you know, what they've been doing, but based off of what else is going around in the division, what else is going around in the league. I think that gives you a lot of hope and a lot of optimism that is good and is well deserved. And especially, John, when you look, and I know that year to year things change, right? The worst team last year isn't going to be the worst team this year. You know, there's going to be some great
Houston
teams.
might be there.
Yeah, Houston might.
Chicago might not
Houston,
be there.
You know, but Chicago, you look in the division and you're saying, okay, I think we feel pretty confident. 5-1 last year. I think 3-3 the year before, right? I think we feel pretty confident that the Lions should at least enter the season as maybe the favorites for this division. But then you look at the, you know, outside the division, the teams that they play next year: Atlanta, Carolina, Vegas, the Saints, the Bucks, right? The Ravens, who might not have a quarterback. I mean, you look at who they play and you're like, I know there's obviously on paper, it's like, oh my God, yeah, Atlanta sucked last year. Carolina, I know they beat our ass, but, you know, probably going to have a rookie quarterback. What are they going to look like? Raiders, they were kind of a, you know what, show last year with Josh. You know what I'm saying? So you obviously look at the schedule too, and you're saying, man, not only in the division, but the other teams we have to play. And look, you still got Kansas City on there. You've got, you know, Dallas on there, who was good last year. You've got the Chargers, who knows with them. I mean, sometimes they score 50 points. Sometimes they can't get their own head out of their own ass. But I think you're just looking at the teams they have to play, looking at this team, saying they're primed to take that next step. I think it's more than fair to expect at least 10 wins out of this team, at least, because that's what it takes now with the 17-game schedule to get into the playoffs. I don't think you're going to have many years where you're going to get
unless you're in the NFC South.
Not unless you win the division with a 8-9 record. Which, who knows? I mean, if we're expecting this division to fall off, maybe 9 wins you the NFC North next year, based off of, you know, maybe the Vikings taking a step back and the Packers and Bears. I mean, who knows, right? But I think that 10-win mark is definitely fair to say. That's a fair expectation for a minimum. At least.
And if you're into the bets, it might be time to take that 10 wins right now, take the over, because I do think there's still some free agent visits that are signed up. Calais Campbell is supposed to be coming in at the end of the week. We'll have some more information on that next week, depending on what he decides. And I you know, obviously the draft, you know, there's still a lot to be determined, and that number may bump up to 10.5 at some point, depending on what happens in Green Bay. I mean, there's just a lot of factors. So when we get a chance to talk again next week, I think we're going to have some more information and some more insight on what's going on with Lamar, what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, you know, speaking more in the division, but around the league as well. And we'll continue to break down the expectations that we have for the Detroit Lions, for Brad Holmes in the NFL draft. And we appreciate you listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, download, so that, you know, Necessary Roughness is always in your inbox every time we come out with a new episode. It's Lang and Jansen for Necessary Roughness.